Hello everyone, Ms. Ginna here.
Hello. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Okay, hello everyone. My name is Jenna. I'm an IBM developer advocate. I want to welcome you all for coming to our event today. Today is part 1 of our 2-part series in OpenShift 101, learning the basics of Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud. Nigel is going to lead you on your OpenShift journey today, and I'll introduce you in just a moment. I'd like to first say thank you all very much for coming, taking the time out of your day to join us today. I've posted in the chat if you'd all like to share where you're joining us from today or where you're maybe quarantining or working from home from right now. If you look in the chat also, I have listed all of the resources that you will need in order to participate and work through the workshop. I will also be sharing this with you all at the end as well, so don't worry. But if you look in the chat, there are the workshop slides, the link for creating an IBM Cloud account, the GitHub repo for the workshop, the GitHub gist, and the link to accessing your clusters, which we will walk you through in just a bit. I wanted to share with you some tags to use on social media if you want to share any insights, feedback, things you've learned. If you want to share on social media, here are some social tags for you to use. And just so we can all get to know each other a little better, kind of do a check-in before we get started. In the chat, if you would like to share and get to know your fellow techies, if you would share your name and your title or what company you're from, or maybe you're in a coding program or a university program, where you're joining from, or possibly where you're from, something you love, and then a quirk. So something that's uniquely weird or different about you. While you're doing that, I will go first for reference and introduce myself, and then I will introduce you to Nigel as well. And then I'll share a few slides to help you all get started, and then Nigel will take you on your OpenShift journey today. So my name is Jenna. I'm a developer advocate at IBM. I am joining from Western New York. I'm originally from Detroit. I've been working in Austin at the IBM Innovation Center there for the past 2 years. And then I recently joined the New York City team with Nigel in the last 6 months or so. Something I love is a really good workshop. I really like in-depth, very broken down tutorials that result in having a really cool project at the end. Something where where you're not just learning concepts, you're actually building them out into something at the end. Is something I love, and I'm dedicating a lot more time getting back to now. And then a quirk, so something that's unique to me for sure. I have a tuna obsession. I'm obsessed with tuna. If it's on the menu, I feel compelled to order it. And if it's not good, I basically judge all of the rest of the food on the menu based on their terrible tuna. So that's a little bit about me. I'm glad you all could make it today, and it's great to meet all of you. And feel free to share your information in the chat so we can all get to know each other. I'm going to pass it off to Nigel so he can introduce himself a little bit, and then I'll get you started and set up before we jump into our workshop.
Hey y'all, I'm Nigel. I am also a developer advocate on the New York City team. I recently relocated to Austin. So this is new for me being here. The things that I'm supposed to share, what were they, Jenna? Something?
Oh, so where you're joining from or where you're from, something you love, and of course, something unique or different about you that not everyone would know.
Yeah, so it's something I love, music. I used to work in the music industry for quite some time before getting involved in technology. Still something that I love dearly, and maybe we'll go back into one day. Something that's unique about me, I don't know, pretty run of the mill, sorry. Not, yeah, not a lot terribly unique. I don't know. I suppose people that know me better would have a different opinion. So yeah.
Nigel's a pretty interesting guy. I feel like you dabble around in a lot of things. I always see different devices, or I should say pieces of devices around you.
Okay, yeah. I suppose I'm into like yeah, single board computers, like small electronics, like Raspberry Pis, Arduinos, things like that. And yeah, I like repairing things myself. So I took apart my MacBook Pro the other day because it needed a new keyboard. So yeah, I don't know if that's unique, but something I like to do. There you go.
A little thing to share.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Nigel. And thank you everyone for sharing in the chat. Let me go here. So what are we doing today? So today we are doing part 1 of a part 2 series, OpenShift 101. So we're going to, over the next 2 days, learn the basics of Red Hat OpenShift on IBM Cloud. We ran this workshop in March, and some of the feedback that we got was it can be a bit of dense material. So we took your feedback and reiterated over what we did, and we broke it up into 2 days for you guys. So you won't get as mentally fatigued maybe as you may have the last time. So today we're going to do the first half. Tomorrow we will do the second half. There we go. So just to answer a few housekeeping questions. So yes, you will have access to all of the material. This is the link to the slides. All of the links I will show you have also been posted in the chat, and I will post again at the end. However, just for reference, here is the link for the slides. Here is the link, the IBM Cloud Signup link. Again, this is at the top of the chat as well for you to sign up for an IBM Cloud account if you have not already. There we go. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you do not have an IBM Cloud account and you would like to follow along, if you would venture over to Firefox, Chrome, Safari, whatever your weapon of choice is, and this is your the link that we would like you to use to sign up for your cloud account. When you add this link to the browser, it will take you to, I'll show you on the next slide, the IBM Cloud signup page. You will be creating an IBM Cloud free light tier account. So this is free for you to use for any of your projects or IBM Cloud needs. So this is what it looks like. So you'll go to, you'll be directed to the IBM Cloud signup page, and you'll be creating a new account, and you'll be signing up for the free light tier account. This is the link for the workshop Gitbook. Again, this is posted in the chat, as well as the link to connecting to clusters. So I'll encourage you all to sign up for an IBM Cloud account if you don't already have one. I will also encourage you, if you do have an account, to get logged into your IBM Cloud account. And I will let Nigel get started. This is the link to accessing your clusters, which Nigel will walk you through, but I just wanted to put this up. Again, this is also listed in the chat. So these are all the things that you need to get started, and Nigel will guide you through start to finish, so getting you all set up, getting you connected to your first OpenShift clusters.
All right, thanks, Jenna. So I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. And we'll try to take this relatively slowly. So if you check the Git book, make sure that I can still see the chat and everything. All right. I can't see the chat, but someone will be there. Just stop me if there's something that comes in.
Yes.
So if you go to the Gitbook site, this is laid out for you, the entire workshop, and we're going to work through it together. The first part's the getting started. That's what we're going to focus on now to make sure that you all are able to log into the clusters that are pre-provisioned for you. But it only works if you have your IBM Cloud account already set up. So once you do, you'll come to a page that looks like this. And let me drop the link in there for that. Where did this? Oh, this is a little frustrating. There we go. Okay. So we've got this link here. So the keyword there, oh, yeah. Keyword here is OS Lab. And then my IBM ID will be my email. I will agree to the terms and conditions. Move this. One second. Once you get there, give that a second to finish up. It's still working. What you'll see when it works is that you'll come to your IBM Cloud account when you log in. There's a drop down here at the top, and there will be a list of different. Yours will probably have two. I have a lot because we do this a lot in a lot of different ways. But the correct one will be, I think it's this one. Come up here. And if you go to the resource list there under clusters, you'll have access to a cluster there. This is the one that's been assigned to me. So if I click it, I'll be brought to the dashboard page. This page tells me as well that number 3 is mine, which confirms that I have the right cluster. But yeah, if you come over here, you'll get the same display that would show up if you had logged in and paid for one yourself. But these are here free for you all to use. Yes, the OS Lab is the same key for everyone. Thanks for clarifying that, Tim. Okay, so I want to give everyone a second to catch up there. Actually, while we're doing that, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what OpenShift is. So I'm going to back up here. So in the introduction, and hopefully when we get through this, it'll give everyone an opportunity to catch up with us. So to answer the question, what is OpenShift? So when we talk about how we do deployments in this cloud native age, we work a lot with containers. If you're unfamiliar with what a container is, it's a method of process isolation. So it's a much lower overhead way for us to give each of our applications their own instance of an operating system. So instead of setting up a bare metal server or setting up a virtual machine, we can use these things called containers, which allow us to achieve a similar level of isolation, but with a lot lower overhead because the isolation is happening at the operating system level. And there are some complications that come with working with containers, especially when you're working with large groups of containers. That is solved by a class of software called orchestration. In the beginning, when everyone was still figuring out how to use containers, there were a lot of different solutions that came up around container orchestrators. And the one that has so far won out is called Kubernetes. It's a project that was created at Google. It was originally called Borg and Omega to manage the container deployments that they were doing to make all of Google services run. And they open sourced it, donated it to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, and it became Kubernetes. Now, the biggest contributors to Kubernetes today are still Google and Red Hat. And the reason it's significant that Red Hat is doing this is because they've built another layer on top of Kubernetes called OpenShift to make it a lot easier to use and also to provide features like extending the software significantly to make it more of a platform. So you can think of Kubernetes as a sort of like containers as a service, and you can think of OpenShift as a platform as a service to be able to use and deploy containerized workloads. Now, OpenShift is running Kubernetes. There's Kubernetes under the hood. So if you're familiar with Kubernetes, getting into OpenShift it's a little bit easier because all of the commands that you're used to using in Kubernetes are still valid in OpenShift. OpenShift just extends that API significantly to give you some more features. So what we're going to talk about today is not so much the different extensions, but we're going to get you at least like able to use and deploy an application on OpenShift. And then I'm going to try to answer questions and cater this to where you all's needs are as we work through this, work through these examples. So for now, I think there's like a little poll thing, right? Can I get like a yes or a no if you all are ready to get started with the demo stuff? +1. Okay, and if there are any questions as well, let me know. I just vomited a lot of information. So +1, +1, +1. All right, yeah, let's get into it. So there's another thing here under the getting started for accessing the Cloud Shell. So if you don't want to install a bunch of tools to your command line, you can just use the Cloud Shell, and I'll show you that here. This little button here will bring up an instance of a terminal that is running in IBM Cloud that, because you're logged in, has access to the things that you've provisioned. So it should be fairly straightforward for you to be able to use the Cloud Shell as opposed to using your own terminal with whatever you've already had set up. So I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. Okay. Get my screens organized. Perfect. Okay. So we're going to focus on, I'm going to start with exercise 1. We're going to be deploying a node application with source to image. So I'm going to pause for a sec. Actually, so in this exercise, you'll deploy a simple Node.js Express application. Example Health. Example Health is a simple UI for a patient health record system. We'll use this example to demonstrate key OpenShift features throughout this workshop. You can find the sample application in the GitHub repository here. So I'll copy this link and show you the repo. So first, a word about what source to image is. Now, I talked a bit about containers and orchestration, but for people who have never worked with containers, there might be a lot of questions around how do you even start with building a container and even deploying it. And source to image is something that helps solve that problem for us. It's an open source project that was created by Red Hat, and it's packaged with OpenShift. That essentially what they have done is created what they call builder images. So they create containers that have everything necessary in it to run particular languages or frameworks. And then you point that builder image at whatever your application is, whatever application you've written, and it will pull in all of your code and create a container for you and then deploy that container to OpenShift. So it It's this really simple pipeline that if you're a developer especially and not really interested in the architecture of how things work, you just want to take your application that you've written and deploy it, this is a really good way to do it. It's also good because one of the key security features of OpenShift is that running things as root is restricted. You can't, many of the containers that are already created are running as a root user. And that's a dangerous thing because if there's a bug in Kubernetes or OpenShift that allows that process to escape its container, it now has root privileges to run whatever it wants on your cluster. Not great. So one of the things that OpenShift does is by default disable being able to run these containers as root. And what that means is that out of the box, a lot of containers that you're used to working with may not work automatically. So one workaround that you can do is using source to image. So we're gonna do that to deploy our example health. So I'm gonna start with, I'm gonna trust that you all have this Git book up here so that I can show you what's going on with the clusters and don't have to switch back and forth between the documentation. So if I just click this button here to open my OpenShift Web Console, we'll get a window that shows up that will look similar to what's in the Git book. Here we go. Beautiful. Oh. Come back, buddy. Okay, here we are. What we get here is information about our cluster here on the dashboards. And one other key thing that I want to point out is another thing that's really cool about the way that OpenShift works is that we've got two main views. We've got our administrator view, which gives us all this information about the cluster, which is important for our systems folks, the people who are setting up our clusters, everything like that, making sure that they're running, monitoring them. But for the developers, a lot of times you don't necessarily need to be concerned with these things, just deploying your application. And so there are certain things that you do in the administrator view that aren't available to developers, but with the role-based access, you can assign developers access to your cluster as a developer, and then they are sandboxed and like have access to just the features that they need. So the first thing that we need to do is create a project. If you're familiar with Kubernetes, you can think of projects as namespaces with a few extra features. At the core, it does create a namespace, but it gives you a few other things that I'm not sure that we'll have time to get into, but we'll see. So we want to start with naming our project, and we're going to call it Example Health. So I'll show you again on this cluster page here. There's this blue OpenShift Web Console button. That's the one that you click to get to this the view, that administrator view. You're welcome. So once we create our project, we'll see this tag here. This is PR Example Health. Our project is active. There's not a lot going on here. We see that there's no resource utilization because all we've done is just create this namespaces project. We haven't done anything yet with it. So what we want to do now is switch over to our developer view. And we get this, the first window that opens up is this topology view, but we can check here to see that we're in this Example Health project and we can organize applications in our projects. One other thing that I want to show you is that all of the things that we're doing to run our applications in OpenShift are the same things that OpenShift is doing to run itself. So you can see that when we look at this project view, there are a few dozen projects that are already here. So like your Kube API server for Kubernetes, all of these different things are organized into their own projects as well. The marketplace, like all of these different features of OpenShift are developed and run in the same way. So what we're advising you to do or showing you how to do is the same way that the application itself is running itself. But the important thing is to make sure that whatever you're in, whatever project you're in is the right one, because I've done this before where I'm working in the wrong project, tweaking features, and then my cluster breaks. So yeah, just be careful that you're in the project that you intend to be in when you switch between your views and do things. So Everyone's still with me? We good? Still here. Tight. Great. Awesome. I'm sitting in a room just talking to my computer. So I check in a few times to make sure that we're all still here. So this topology view is going to open us or show us a lot of the things that I was talking about before about how we get to how we do source to image. So when we're looking at ways to deploy applications to OpenShift, when you look at when you look at it, this is the add. I said topology. There's nothing in the topology. There's no workloads found, so it doesn't show the topology. It shows what happens if we click add. So you can deploy from Git if you already have your Git repository somewhere, if you already have a pre-existing container image, but we're gonna work this from catalog. If you have a Docker file, if you have already created the YAML from Kubernetes or something like that, or if you wanna look at database services as well to add. So we're gonna look at the from catalog button. And all of these, what we see here are these builder images that I mentioned before. So there's a builder image for if you have a Django Python app with Postgres, if you've got Go, JBoss doing Java things, Jenkins, MariaDB, MySQL, Nginx. But what we're concerned with here is Node.js. The application we're deploying is a Node app. So we're gonna hit here on this Node.js app to create an application. And then we get this cool form that comes up. And we can choose a builder image version. We're just gonna leave it here on 10. And then we're gonna plug in the URL of the repository that we want to deploy from. So this is where we come over here, this IBM Node STI OpenShift. This is our example health application. So we're gonna drop that in here. And it validates that that's a good URL. Now, we wanna make sure to check this, our context directory. So in Node, we wanna set this so that it knows where our application is actually starting from, because if we're just trying to deploy from the top level of this directory, you can see there's no node in here. There's nothing for it to run. We'll point this to Node and it'll just throw up its hands. It doesn't have any idea what to do with this. What we actually need is what's in this site folder here. This is where our JavaScript is. This is where our web app is. So we want to make sure that OpenShift knows to launch our application from there. So we're going to set our context directory to site. Spell that right the second time. The rest of this we can leave as default. And one other thing as well that I would like to point out that's a really useful thing, and it's kind of difficult if you're deploying with just Kubernetes, is that this button here to create a route to the application. So what I love about this is that you don't have to mess around with creating services and exposing them like you would if you're working with Kubernetes. As soon as our application is deployed and ready to go, it creates a route, a URL that we can use to hit our application. So when I hit that start, we get here to our topology view. This is what topology looks like. So each of these like circles, if we were deploying multiple things in here, we would see a bunch of different things pop up under here. And we may get into that, but for now, we'll hang out here. And if I click on this to see what's going on, we see right now what it tried to do is pull a pod forward already, and it doesn't have an image that's made, so it backed off. So right now then it starts its own build here. It's running, and we can look at the logs for this event and see it copying blobs. So it's building our container right now from this last commit in the repo, and shortly we'll have our container and our pod. And I'm using those terms, they are not interchangeable. So if I go back to our topology, we'll see that Kubernetes works with pods. They're the smallest manipulatable unit inside of Kubernetes. What Kubernetes has, what pods are groups of containers. One or more containers are organized into pods. So when we're talking about containers, but for Kubernetes, for OpenShift, they're looking at pods. It takes the containers that it creates, organizes it into pods, and then deploys those pods to our cluster. Thanks for dropping that link there, Timothy. That was helpful. Our container is creating, and now it's running. We saw this little circle turn blue here. This is running. So this route here, if I click this button here, we get the login to our example health page. That's it. It took us just a few minutes from a Node.js application that's built in our GitHub repository to be able to deploy it to OpenShift just like that. And that's one of the really cool things about OpenShift, is that it makes it easy for us to take our applications, whether they've been built with containers in mind already or not, and deploy them relatively quickly without a lot of work. Most of the work was just all of this talking that I was doing. So you could do it a lot faster if you don't have me in your ear. So I'm just gonna check and see if I missed anything. So we can, in this test app, we can enter anything in here. Test is what it says, and it'll open up sign in. And we can see what it looks like. But you can see all of the code for this whole thing inside of the GitHub repo. And I'm gonna pause here for a second and check in. Are we still together? Everyone's still all right? Are there any questions before we launch into the next bit? No? Stuck at the image pool, back off, getting a status 254, error build fail. That's interesting. I don't know that one. So if it's stuck at the image pool back off, I would give it a second because it does do that at first, and then a new one pops up. So if you, for the image pool back off, like check in the build and the logs and see if it's giving you something there. The build error fail, I'm not sure what's happening there. That one is a little new to me. So if someone wants to help Clayton there, I would appreciate that. Are there any other questions, issues that we've run into so far? So what I did is deploy an existing app on OpenShift. That is correct. I took an application that was a Node.js app and I deployed it to OpenShift, and that application is running at that route. If I gave you, go back. This link here is a public link. So if you hit it, you could also go and see the application that I've deployed. So what I did was take an application that's already written in Node.js and deployed it to OpenShift. Good question. Failed to fetch input source. Okay. I would double check the GitHub link, make sure that that's right there. Thank you. Cool. So user aside symbol. And did we make sure that the context directory there was in the site? Thank you, Evan. You were spot on. Evan seems to have that pretty well handled. So I will go on through this next part. This next part isn't that complex, so you'll be able to catch up relatively quickly once the application deploys. So the next bit that we want to talk about are these webhooks. So we took our link and we manually deployed our application. But what happens when we update our application and we want that to track with what we see in our app? So one thing we can do is set up webhooks to GitHub so that whenever a commit is pushed to our repository, that commit propagates through to our application in OpenShift. So what I'm gonna do here is we're gonna make a fork of the repository. I'm suspicious that I already have a fork because I do this workshop a fair amount and I keep forgetting to delete it. Yeah, I've already forked it. So here is my fork. And I'm gonna go into the settings and I'm gonna look under webhooks. I'm going to delete this one from the last time that I did it. Okay. And I'm going to add a webhook. And we'll come back to this page. But if I come now back over to our topology, I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at our builds, not our topology. This is the build configuration that was created for us when we deployed our app the first time. We're going to modify this build configuration to be able to look at our GitHub repo, not just the repo of the app that was already created, but to look at our fork, so that when our fork updates, so does our application. So what we see here are webhooks, and we're going to copy that. The first thing that we want to do is we want to edit our build config. And we're going to scroll down to line 21. And it's looking at that IBM GitHub repo right now. We want it to look instead at the one that we've forked. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that and drop it in. Save that. That won't trigger a new build. But what we'll do now is to copy the webhook here, copy the URL with secret, and for some reason this button works sometimes and sometimes it doesn't. So you all will have to let me know if that button works for you. Otherwise, I need to figure it out. But I have a workaround. So I'm gonna add the payload URL. The secret goes in this part. I'm just gonna go look at the YAML for the secret and pull the secret out and paste it in because for some reason that copy link wasn't working. So the secret is here. I'm just gonna copy that. Yeah, see, we get a little pop-up that says it was copied. I'm just gonna paste that into here where it should have gone in the link. This is gonna be JSON. And then we wanna add that webhook. And if we get this green check mark here, that means that we've set it up correctly. It is communicating with our cluster just fine. Now, how can we prove that? I'm gonna go into the code for my repo. I'm gonna go into site. I'm gonna hit this, hit the public, and then look at our login HTML. Now, let me jump back over to our builds. We see our topology and our application here. Let's pay attention. We've got like a build that happened 8 minutes ago, build number 1. Now, when I make these updates to this repo, I'm gonna just change it. Let's see. Instead of it saying Container Summit Health, this is the last time I did it was for the Container Summit. We're gonna call this OpenShift World Tour Austin. OpenShift World Tour Austin Health. Example. Oops. Something here. Okay, and I'm gonna commit those changes. Now, that commit is taken, and if we jump back over to our topology, we see that a build is already pending. So as soon as we make that change, the webhook sends a notification to OpenShift, and it starts building a new version of our application. Now, our old version of the app is still there. It's still there until the build finishes. But when it does finish building, it's gonna update our application so that when I refresh this page, we'll see the text that I changed in our last, in that commit message. So when that build finishes, we can look at build number 2, see how it's doing. Building. Yay. Push successful, that's a good sign. So let's go back to our topology, look at our application. Okay, that build 2 is complete. Now I'm gonna refresh this page and we see the updates there. And that's something else that's like super cool about OpenShift. It's just like that. We forked someone else's application that they had built, made our own copy of it, made a few quick changes of it, and our version of it shows those changes without us doing any extra configuration. So as a developer, all you really have to do is point it to your version control and just keep using version control how you probably already do, and your application will track with you. So I'm gonna pause here again and check in to see if we've got any questions. Also, let me look at the text of the workshop to make sure I didn't miss anything. Good example of CI/CD. Yeah, kind of. If you're not familiar with CI/CD, it stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment. And it's just like, as we're creating our applications, like building them iteratively and always having like a version up so that, you know, we're creating pipelines that don't take down we don't have downtime in our applications. We need to make updates and push changes. Yeah. So yeah, everything, yeah, I did all of the things and the steps there. That was all good. All right, great. Do we have any questions, comments, concerns, feelings, affirmations? Everybody here? No? Everyone left, it's just me. I'm alone. Okay. I guess Evan's here too. Hi, Evan. Yes, you can edit the context directory after the fact. So if I go look at my build and look at my build config, edit build, on line 74, you see the context directory there. And then when you save that, you can trigger another build. It might be easier just to create a different like project, just like add a different project, just delete that project that's already there. So you can just like delete that like that. I'm not gonna do it, but you can, and then just like create a new build. But yeah, if you don't want to dig around in the YAML to do it, you can update that way. Are there any other questions, comments, anything before we move on? Are we ready to move on? You're welcome. Thank you. Okay. Well, we got about 10 minutes left. This is usually where we pause for the Q&A and everything, but I will press on. Doesn't look like we have any questions. So we want to look at the logging and monitoring now. That's what exercise 2 is over on our, there we go. Looking at our logging and monitoring. So this is where we can use like our Cloud Shell to do this part. So I'm going to open my Cloud Shell, copy this command, paste it in, and this app route here is where we're going to, oops. Okay. Where'd my app route go? Here it is. Instead of login. So copy that. Drop that into our Cloud Shell. Cool. I didn't do that in the background. Whoops. All right. So now that's running. We should, in our applications, let's go back and check. our logs for application. Oops. View logs, there we go. So we can see that that was 36 minutes ago. Oh, no. Yeah. So this is our endpoint being hit by that application, that while true that we hit there. All right, so we can see in our logs that people are calling for the endpoint. And if we wanted, oh, great. I'm glad, Clayton, this is working. You're welcome. You're welcome. Thanks for sticking through and making it work. I know how exciting it is when it does work. I remember the first time I saw updating the Git repo work, I lost my mind. It was amazing. So if we jump over to the terminal, we have a shell that's this is inside of the pod that's running our application. If we look inside of it, we see our application, all of those things there. And if we look at the processes that are running, yeah, this is our pod running our application in isolation, because you can tell PID1 is in VM and one is at never init. So that shows us that we're in a container. And we want to have a look at how we monitor things in OpenShift. So we've got this events tab as well. So every time something happens of note in our development cycle, we get a new event that gets logged. So we see originally, let's see, 5 events. We got an image, we created the container, we started the container. Then we got that new image when we made that update, and then we pushed that new image. We assigned that new image, that new pod to the endpoint. So that's when we updated the text in the field. But if you wanted to look more at you can go much deeper into the events, but these are the ones of note that we've done since we started building our application. The next bit, that's all of exercise 2, is just showing you the different features that you've got available inside of OpenShift to log and to monitor. In the next bit, we want to look at your metrics and dashboards. And if we switch back over to our administrator view, one cool thing about OpenShift is that it takes a bunch of OpenShift projects open source projects and packages them up to build that platform. Like I said, if you just installed Kubernetes or got like a managed Kubernetes, there wouldn't necessarily be a bunch of other things that you need to go with it. One of the things for monitoring that's really useful is having Grafana, and that's something that's already installed by default inside of OpenShift. So if we open our monitoring and we went to go look at our dashboards and we logged in with OpenShift, we want to allow the permissions, and it loads Grafana for us. And so if we go here to the left, oh, not home, where's our, there we go. So if we want to look at our compute resources for the cluster, we can see how it's doing, and we can see each of our applications, or each of our projects, each of our namespaces are represented by a different color. And so the example health one here is this yellow one. So we got a big uptick when we started deploying the application, and then another one since we've been hitting that endpoint with an endless loop. We can look more specifically at things like memory usage, network in and out, all of these different features of Grafana, which I encourage you to check out. Grafana is another open source project that's under CNCF. and it's getting data from another open source project called Prometheus. It's where we're getting all of our metrics from what's running on our nodes to give us the information. So if we go back to our admin dashboard, we can see that there are features also for alerting and for metrics. So with alerting, we've got Alert Manager, so you could set up some alerts to be able to be notified when certain things happen. Also checking metrics. If we created a query, we could monitor that as well. This all goes really deep into getting as deep into Prometheus and Alert Manager as you like. Prometheus is a monitoring system that uses a time series database. It was initially created by SoundCloud, of all people. And Alert Manager is an extension onto Prometheus. And that's about, yes, you can configure an email notification. Configure text if you like. This is about where we were intending to get in the first half of the workshop. We've gone through exercises 1 through 3. We're going to look at exercises 4 through 6 tomorrow. And that's about at the hour, at the time that we had allotted for this. So do we have any questions or comments or anything while we're here? I can send some documentation over about setting up alerts. But yeah, that all gets pretty deep. Are there any? I'm still here. If not, that's fine too.
And feel free to unmute and ask your question if you would like. This session, as well as tomorrow, is being recorded. I'm actually going to share with you all the links to accessing everything today as well as tomorrow. So after the session today, it is being live streamed, so the recording will be available online as well. And the clusters that you have access to and created today, you will have the same access to them tomorrow as well for the second part of the workshop.
Okay. Well, if all hearts and minds are clear, thank y'all for joining us. I appreciate you all spending the afternoon. Hopefully you all learned something. And yeah, as Jenna said, you have access to these clusters for a little while. So yeah, go ahead, play around with them, try to deploy some things, have some fun. Thanks for all the help, Evan and Jenna and Timothy, everyone in the chat who's been helping out. For everyone who asks questions, that helps too. So yeah, thanks a lot, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nigel. I'm going to hang out here for a few more minutes, just to give you all time to get any links or anything else that you possibly need. And then we will continue this tomorrow. So thank you all for coming.
All right, well, it doesn't look like there are any more questions coming in, so I'm gonna take off.
All right, thank you, Nigel. We'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.